Hello and welcome to Zero Cool Gaming and today's hardware review. Today we're going to be reviewing ergonomic hardware and why I use it. Ergonomic hardware, there's a lot of it. I mean, you've got mice, you've got keyboards, you've got chairs, desks, um, I guess that's really about it, isn't it? Yeah, that covers the majority of it. Now, what I use is a mouse and keyboard that are ergonomic. And there are several reasons for that. One of the main reasons was, well, way back when I was 18. Well, that goes in the Wayback Machine. Um, I went to the doctor because my hands, um, I played video games my whole life. So we're talking about when I was playing a Sega Saturn and a PlayStation 1. Okay, way back then, and I also had a computer with a standard flat keyboard and, your ball mouse. You guys probably don't remember those, but there used to be things, they're balls inside the mouse itself, and the ball would roll when you move the mouse. They don't make them that way anymore, but that's how they used to make them. Um, and anyway, I was 19. I went to the doctor because I would sit there and I was playing, whatever on my Saturn, and my hands after a couple of hours would start to hurt. And it was hurting in my wrists, and that would go to my elbows. And if I kept doing it, that would go all the way up to my shoulders. And the same thing when I was working on my computer. I'd be typing up a report or whatever for school, and after a couple of hours of sitting there doing and typing on my computer, my hands would hurt really, really bad. I mean, it felt like needles were going through it. So I went to the doctor. And they did their little tests and scanned my hands. And he told me that I had carpal tunnel syndrome. And there was something else that he said along with it. And he said this isn't the type of injuries that I had were the types of injuries that he saw in, people like typists who had been typing on typewriters and then, computers later for 20 years. And he said that for whatever reason, I was susceptible to this, and um, my body, I guess, got injured more easily with this type of, or for this type of injury. So, of course, his suggestion was surgery. And I, went online and I looked that up and I saw the damage that type of surgery did to people's hands. And I decided, no, that's insane. I'm not doing that. So my options back then were pretty limited. Um, I don't even think they had ergonomic desks yet, but they did have ergonomic keyboards and an ergonomic mouse. Now, back my first ergonomic mouse and keyboard, the mouse cost $150, and so did the keyboard. My wife was pissed because a standard keyboard back then was like $20. A cheap mouse, $15. And I'm sitting here telling her that I need a $150 mouse and a $150 keyboard. She was not happy. I guess that wasn't my wife, that was my girlfriend. Wow, it was a long time ago. Anyway, um, I didn't get married till I was 20, or 23, actually. Uh, and that would have been to another girl. But I started, well, I'll just go ahead and date. I started dating a girl when I was 16. Dated her from 16 to 19. Um, she cheated on me every year, and the third time she cheated on me, I just had enough. And then I met my wife when I was like 20. We got married at 23, and then I got divorced at 24. So there's that way back machine. But anyway, my girlfriend was very upset because that was back then a huge expense for us. But we made it work, and I got ergonomic keyboard and an ergonomic mouse. Um, and I have maintained using these devices for my entire life. I still use them today. In fact, the mouse you see on your screen right now is the mouse I have in front of me right now. Um, and then the keyboard is this keyboard. If you, let's go back to the mouse here. This mouse is not as, it needs to have a little bit more of an angle to it for it to really be truly ergonomic. And you know, they do make mouses with more of an, these type of mouses with more of an angle to them, but they're a lot more expensive than this one was. This mouse right here, I think I paid $39 for, and this keyboard, I think I paid 50. It might have been a little less, but I think that's what I paid for it. So ergonomic hardware has come down in cost, and I've been able to work on keyboards and mice and play video games my entire life since then, um, without really uh, injuring myself further in that respect. If I game for too long, my hands will hurt really bad. So I try to limit my gaming to an hour before I take breaks. And the same thing with like working on my keyboard and mouse. I try to limit that to no more than 2 hours before I take a break. And it's worked. I haven't needed surgery as a result. And in truth, I can't say that it's gotten any worse since then. In the past, you know, basically 30 years. Yeah. Okay, so uh a long time. I've been able to mitigate the injuries throughout my life and keep it to a minimum. And that's a good thing. But if I hadn't done this, I probably would have had to have surgery because I would have continued to harm myself. Um, and back when I was, you know, I was like I said, I was in school. I was also working, and I was working as a computer programmer at that time. And I changed my employment, and I went to work for a factory job. Um, and that didn't hurt my hands. You know, after factory job, I went and did, you know, other things after that. But regardless, I actually quit my job as a programmer because I didn't want to continue to harm myself in that respect. And I knew that the company I worked for wasn't going to buy me an ergonomic mouse and keyboard like they would today. Back then, this wasn't an issue that a lot of people had. I'm not saying that there weren't people who had this issue. I'm sure there were. But because this was a relatively new technology and it was relatively new to the workforce, um, the flat keyboards and normal mice weren't hurting people. At least not a lot of people yet. Um, when I first bought this hardware, it was it felt clunky and odd to work with because you're used to using flat and the other one, and your body gets used to that. So the first mouse that I bought like this, when I first started using it, I was like, I'm never going to be able to game again, and that upset me, like really bad. Um, the same thing with the keyboard. I was like, I'm never going to be able to learn to use these keyboards the way that I use a flat keyboard. And understand at the time I was able to type like 160 words per minute. You know, uh, so to me that this dropping my typing down, I think it was like 40, 50 words per minute when I first started with the ergonomic keyboard, and the mouse. I mean, my click rate probably went from I don't know how fast it was, but it at least dropped in half, if not to a quarter of what it was, because it took me a lot longer to move the cursor to where I needed to move it, and I hadn't learned to flick the cursor. I mean, today I'm pretty good at flicking it and getting it where I need it to be. And that works. It really does. Um, I know that it doesn't look like it while I'm flicking it right here, but that's because this mouse is set for gaming. And when you go into a game, this flick rate that I have it set to is a 90-degree turn left and right. Is it a perfect 90 every time? No, but it's relatively close. So that's why it's set the way it is. Um, and these keyboards, even though they are clunky and they feel odd when you first start using them, your body gets used to it. Just give it time. And I'll give you a couple of things that I've learned over the years. A couple of, I guess they call them life hacks today. We'll start with the keyboard here. My keyboard, I have a computer desk in front of me, and it has a mouse and I guess it's called a keyboard tray, but both my mouse and keyboard are on that same tray, and the tray slides out. The keyboard itself sits off the edge of that tray from like here all the way across to here. So this whole bottom section down here is actually off the edge of the tray. And the same thing with the mouse. The whole bottom edge of the mouse from like here over, this whole bottom edge is off the edge of the tray. And the reason for that is when you rest your hand on this mouse, you don't want the edge of your thumb to be on the edge of your desk. You don't want that edge to be digging into your thumb. And you also don't want the edge of that desk to be digging into your wrist, 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 into your wrist, because that's going to hurt you, or at least me. It'll hurt me. And the same thing with the keyboard. I don't want my wrist to be resting on the edge of anything because that furthers the injury. And that takes time to get used to. But when I rest my hands on this keyboard, my wrists are actually just off the edge here and just off the edge over here. and the palm of my hand sits right down here on this back edge of this rest spot. And the same thing on this side, it sits right down on the back edge of this rest spot. Um, yeah. So it's my palms that set on this black, and this is like soft. I know it's not actually leather; it's imitation leather or whatever, but it's soft and padded. It's not as soft as gel. I do have a an actual gel rest that I use for my gaming keyboard, um, and I've got a mouse pad that is also really soft for my gaming mouse. Um, and I didn't even buy a gaming mouse and keyboard until 2011. Um, so years after I started using ergonomic mice and keyboards, I bought a 2011 Black Widow keyboard and a Rat 9 mouse. And I bought those specifically for playing first person shooter games on my computer. And that's the only time that I ever use either of those. And I've still got both of them. They still both function fine. I've had to replace the what are those things called on the bottom of the mouse that it slides on? The skids. I've had to replace the skids on the bottom of my Rat 9 mouse now twice because I've literally worn them completely off of it. But for most gaming on my computer, I use the Ergo mouse and keyboard. You get used to it. It does take time. Um, like every morning I wake up and the first thing I do is I pop this ball out of the mouse. I clean the ball, and then there's three little balls on the inside, and I clean those too. And I do that every morning. Sometimes I do that halfway through the day. It just depends on how much you use it. I mean, as soon as I get a little bit of drag, I'll pop the ball out and clean it. If I'm gaming and I feel a little bit of, something in there, because you'll feel like there's something in there, you'll feel it through your thumb. I'll just wait till I get to a stopping point. I'll finish whatever fight or battle I'm in, and then I'll pop that ball out and clean it. I mean, there's been days that I've cleaned that ball probably 5 or 6 times. But you want to keep it clean. And it's not like you've got to use chemicals or anything to do it. I mean, I just pop it out, I put it in my shirt, clean the ball off, and I use my shirt to clean out the inside cubby hole here too. You know, um, with the keyboards, um, how I use these keyboards, and how many times I've had to replace these keyboards. As soon as I get keys that start sticking, I just pull it and replace it. I'm sure you could take them apart and clean them and all of that, but you know, the keyboards usually last me 3 or 4 years before that starts happening, and that's reasonable to me. Same thing with the mice; they usually last actually a little longer. The mice I usually continue to work and are used until um, the trackball itself, or not this ball, but the sensor that tracks the trackball starts acting up, or if I have uh, the buttons start sticking on me, and it's usually this button right here that'll stick on me. This is the one that I use all the time for all sorts of stuff, pretty much everything. And it's the mouse I'm using right now is 5 years old, and it's starting to get, it's not sticking, but I have to use more force to push it down than I used to. So it's about ready to be replaced. It's either going to start sticking or it's going to get to the point that it won't click anymore. And that's fine, just replace it. That's what I do. Um, these are good devices for people who have had issues or pain in their wrists and palms or even their fingers. As soon as you start to feel those pains, don't, I'm not going to say don't, but truly, just don't ignore it. Do something about it. And this is to me, the easiest way to solve the problem is to just get an Ergo mouse and keyboard. It works. I've done it for 30 years. It works. I know it works because I haven't gotten any worse in 30 years. It hasn't gotten any better. I mean, once the damage is there, it's there. It doesn't go away, but at least it doesn't get worse. And that to me is a plus. If I had been, you know, born later, let's say it that way, I probably wouldn't have gotten it as bad as I did. There's no guarantee in that, but I probably would have went to the doctor a little earlier about it because I would have had some conception that this was even a problem. This wasn't even being talked about when I started having these issues, as far as I could tell. So there wasn't a lot of information about this type of problem at that time. Well, where today it seems to be pretty much known to everybody that it's a possibility that, using flat keyboards and mice and working on, whatever can cause these types of injuries. So that's my rant for the day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of yours.